Match found. Match found. Move or get zapped.
Exploration Team by Murray Leinster, originally published in Astounding Science Fiction, March 1956. Winner of the Hugo Award, Best Novelette, 1956. Narrated by Tom Trisser. 1. The nearer moon went by overhead. It was jagged and irregular in shape, and was probably a captured asteroid. Huygens had seen it often enough, so he did not go out of his quarters to watch it hurtle across the sky with seemingly the speed of an atmosphere flyer, occulting the stars as it went. Instead, he sweated over paperwork, which should have been odd, because he was technically a felon, and all his labours on Lauren too felonious. It was odd, too, for a man to do paperwork in a room with steel shutters and a huge bald eagle, untethered, dozing on a 3-inch perch set in the wall. But paperwork was not Huygens' real task. His only assistant had tangled with a night walker, and the furtive Codius Company ships had taken him away to where Codius Company ships came from. Huygens had to do 2 men's work in loneliness. To his knowledge, he was the only man in this solar system. Below him there were snufflings. Sitka Pete got up heavily and padded to his water pan. He lapped the refrigerated water and sneezed violently. Sourdough Charlie waked and complained in a rumbling growl. There were diverse other rumblings and mutterings below. Huygens called reassuringly, "Easy there!" and went on with his work. He finished a climate report and fed figures to a computer, and while it hummed over them, he entered the inventory totals in the station log, showing what supplies remained. Then he began to write up the log proper. "Sitka Pete," he wrote, "has apparently solved the problem of killing individual SpheXes. He has learned that it doesn't do to hug them, and that his claws can't penetrate their hide. Not the top hide, anyhow. Today Semper notified us that a pack of SpheXes had found the scent trail to the station. Sitka hid downwind until they arrived. Then he charged from the rear and brought his paws together on both sides of a SpheX's head in a terrific pair of slaps. It must have been like 2 12-inch shells arriving from opposite directions at the same time. It must have scrambled the SpheX's brains as if they were eggs. It dropped dead. He killed 2 more with such mighty pairs of wallops. Sourdough Charlie watched, grunting, and when the SpheXes turned on Sitka, he charged in his turn. I, of course, couldn't shoot too close to him, so he might have fared badly, but that Pharaoh Nell came pouring out of the bear quarters to help. The diversion enabled Sitka Pete to resume the use of his new technique, towering on his hind legs and swinging his paws in the new and grisly fashion. The fight ended promptly. Semper flew and screamed above the scrap, but as usual did not join in. Note: Nugget, the cub, tried to mix in, but his mother cuffed him out of the way. Sourdough and Sitka ignored him as usual. Codius Champion's genes are sound. The noises of the night went on outside. There were notes like organ tones, song lizards. There were the tittering, giggling cries of night walkers, not to be tittered back at. There were sounds like tack hammers and doors closing, and from every direction came noises like hiccups in various keys. These were made by the improbable small creatures which on Lauren 2 took the place of insects. Huygens wrote out, "Sitka seemed ruffled when the fight was over. He painstakingly used his trick on every dead or wounded Sphex, except those he'd killed with it, lifting up their heads for his pile driver-like blows from 2 directions at once, as if to show Sourdough how it was done. There was much grunting as they hauled the carcasses to the incinerator. It almost seemed. The arrival bell clanged, and Huygens jerked up his head to stare at it. Semper, the eagle, opened icy eyes. He blinked. Noises. There was a long, deep, contented snore from below. Something shrieked out in the jungle. Hiccups, clatterings, and organ notes. The bell clanged again. It was a notice that a ship aloft somewhere had picked up the beacon beam, which only Codius Company's ships should know about, and was communicating for a landing. But there shouldn't be any ships in this solar system just now. This was the only habitable planet of the Sun, and it had been officially declared uninhabitable by reason of inimical animal life, which meant Sphinxes. Therefore, no colony was permitted, and the Codius Company broke the law. And there were few graver crimes than unauthorized occupation of a new planet. The bell clanged a 3rd time. Huygens swore. His hand went out to cut off the beacon, but that would be useless. Radar would have fixed it and tied it in with physical features like the nearby sea and the Seer Plateau. The ship could find the place anyhow and descend by daylight. "The devil!" said Huygens, but he waited yet again for the bell to ring. A Codius Company's ship would double ring to reassure him, but there shouldn't be a Codius Company's ship for months. The bell clanged singly. The space phone dial flickered, and a voice came out of it, tinny from stratospheric distortion. "Calling ground, calling ground. Crete line ship Odysseus calling ground on Lauren 2. Landing 1 passenger by boat. Put on your field lights." Huygens' mouth dropped open. A Codius Company's ship would be welcome. A colonial survey ship would be extremely unwelcome, because it would destroy the colony and Sitka and Sourdough and Faronel and Nugget and Semper, and carry Huygens off to be tried for unauthorized colonization and all that it implied. But a commercial ship, landing 1 passenger by boat, there was simply no circumstances under which that would happen. Not to an unknown, illegal colony. Not to a furtive station. Huygens flicked on the landing field lights. He saw the glare in the field outside. Then he stood up and prepared to take the measures required by Discovery. He packed the paperwork he'd been doing into the disposal safe. He gathered up all personal documents and tossed them in. Every record, every bit of evidence that the Codius Company maintained at this station went into the safe. He slammed the door. He touched his finger to the disposal button, which would destroy the contents and melt down even the ashes past their possible use for evidence in court. Then he hesitated. If it were a survey ship, the button had to be pressed, and he must resign himself to a long term in prison. But a Crete line ship, if the space phone told the truth, was not threatening. It was simply unbelievable. He shook his head. He got into travel garb and armed himself. He went down into the bear quarters, turning on lights as he went. There were startled snufflings, and Sitka Pete reared himself very absurdly to a sitting position to blink at him. Sourdough Charlie lay on his back with his legs in the air. He'd found it cooler, sleeping that way. He rolled over with a thump. He made snorting sounds which somehow sounded cordial. Faronel padded to the door of her separate apartment, assigned her so that Nugget would not be underfoot to irritate the big males. Huygens, as the human population of Lauren 2, faced the workforce, fighting force, and, with Nugget, 4/5 of the terrestrial non-human population of the planet. They were mutated Kodiak bears, descendants of that Codius champion for whom the Codius Company was named. Sitka Pete was a good 2,200 pounds of lumbering, intelligent carnivore. Sourdough Charlie would weigh within 100 pounds of that figure. Pharaoh Nell was 1,800 pounds of female charm and ferocity. The Nugget poked his muzzle around his mother's furry rump to see what was toward, and it was 600 pounds of ursine infancy. The animals looked at Huygens expectantly. If he'd had Semper riding on his shoulder, they'd have known what was expected of them. "Let's go," said Huygens. "It's dark outside, but somebody's coming, and it may be bad." He unfastened the outer door of the bear quarters. Sitka Pete went charging clumsily through it. A forthright charge was the best way to develop any situation, if one was an oversized male Kodiak bear. Sourdough went numbing after him. There was nothing hostile immediately outside. Sitka stood up on his hind legs. He reared up a solid 12 feet and sniffed the air. Sourdough methodically lumbered to one side and then the other, sniffing in his turn. Nell came out, 9/10 of a ton of daintiness, and rumbled admonitorily at Nugget, who trailed her closely. Huygens stood in the doorway, his night-sighted gun ready. He felt uncomfortable at sending the bears ahead into a Lauren II jungle at night, but they were qualified to scent danger, and he was not. The illumination of the jungle in the wide path toward the landing field made for weirdness in the look of things. There were arching giant ferns and columnar trees which grew above them, and the extraordinary lanceolate underbrush of the jungle. The flood lamps, set level with the ground, lighted everything from below. The foliage, then, was brightly lit against the black night sky, brightly lit enough to dim out the stars. There were astonishing contrasts of light and shadow everywhere. "On ahead," commanded Huygens, waving. "Hup!" He swung the bear quarters door shut. He moved toward the landing field through the lane of lighted forest. The two giant male Kodiaks lumbered ahead. Sitka Pete dropped to all fours and prowled. Sourdough Charlie followed closely, swinging from side to side. Huygens came alertly behind the two of them, and Pharaoh Nell brought up the rear with Nugget following her closely. It was an excellent military formation for progress through dangerous jungle. Sourdough and Sitka were advance guard and point, respectively, while Pharaoh Nell guarded the rear. With Nugget to look after, she was especially alert against attack from behind. Huygens was, of course, the striking force. His gun fired explosive bullets which would discourage even Spexes, and his night sight, a cone of light which went on when he took up the trigger slack, told exactly where they would strike. It was not a sportsmanlike weapon, but the preachers of Lauren II were not sportsmanlike antagonists. The Nightwalkers, for example. But Nightwalkers feared light. They attacked only in a species of hysteria if it were too bright. Huygens moved toward the glare at the landing field. His mental state was savage. The Codius Company station on Lauren II was completely illegal. It happened to be necessary from one point of view, but it was still illegal. The tinny voice on the space phone was not convincing in ignoring that illegality. But if a ship landed, Huygens could get back to the station before men could follow, and he'd have the disposal safe turned on in time to protect those who'd sent him here. But he'd heard the faraway and high harsh roar of a landing boat rocket, not a ship's bellowing tubes, as he made his way through the unreal-seeming brush. The roar grew louder as he pushed on, and the three big Kodiaks padding here and there, sniffing thoughtfully, making a perfect defensive-offensive formation for the particular conditions of this planet. He reached the edge of the landing field, and it was blindingly bright, with the customary divergent beams slanting skyward so a ship could check its instrument landing by sight. Landing fields like this had been standard once upon a time. Nowadays, all developed planets had landing grids, monstrous structures which drew upon ionospheres for power, and lifted and drew down starships with remarkable gentleness and unlimited force. This sort of landing field would be found where a survey team was at work, or where some strictly temporary investigation of ecology or bacteriology was underway, or where a newly authorized colony had not yet been able to build its landing grid. Of course, it was unthinkable that anybody would attempt a settlement in defiance of the law. Already, as Huygens reached the edge of the scorched open space, the night creatures had rushed to the light like moths on earth. The air was misty with crazily gyrating, tiny flying things. They were innumerable, and of every possible form and size, from the white midges of the night and multi-winged flying worms, to those revoltingly naked-looking larger creatures which might have passed for plucked flying monkeys if they had not been carnivorous and worse. The flying things soared and whirred and danced and spun insanely in the glare. They made peculiarly plaintive humming noises. They almost formed a lamplit ceiling over the cleared space. They did hide the stars. Staring upward, Huygens could just barely make out the blue-white flame of the spaceboat's rocket through the fog of wings and bodies. The rocket flame grew steadily in size. Once, apparently, it tilted to adjust the boat's descending course. It went back to normal. A speck of incandescence at first, it grew until it was like a great star, and then a more than brilliant moon, and then it was a pitiless glaring eye. Huygens averted his gaze from it. Sitka Pete sat lumpily, more than a ton of him, and blinked wisely at the dark jungle away from the light. Sourdough ignored the deepening, increasing rocket roar. He sniffed the air delicately. Pharaoh Nell held Nugget firmly under one huge paw and licked his head as if tidying up to be seen by company. Nugget wriggled. The roar became that of 10,000 thunders. A warm breeze blew outward from the landing field. The rocket boat hurled downward, and its flame touched the mist of flying things, and they shriveled and burned and were hot. Then there were churning clouds of dust everywhere, and the center of the field blazed terribly, and something slid down a shaft of fire and squeezed it flat and sat on it, and the flame went out. The rocket boat sat there, resting on its tail fins, pointing toward the stars from which it came. There was a terrible silence after the tumult. Then, very faintly, the noises of the night came again. There were sounds like those of organ pipes, and very faint and apologetic noises like hiccups. All these sounds increased, and suddenly Huygens could hear quite normally. Then a side port opened with a quaint sort of clattering, and something unfolded from where it had been inset into the hull of the spaceboat, and there was a metal passageway across the flame-hated space on which the boat stood. A man came out of the port. He reached back in and shook hands very formally. He climbed down the ladder rungs to the walkway. He marched above the steaming, baked area, carrying a travelling bag. He reached the end of the walk and stepped gingerly to the ground. He moved hastily to the edge of the clearing. He waved to the spaceboat. There were ports. Perhaps someone returned the gesture. The walkway folded briskly back up to the hull and vanished in it. A flame exploded into being under the tail fins. There were fresh clouds of monstrous choking dust and a brightness like that of a sun. There was noise past the possibility of endurance. Then the light rose swiftly through the dust cloud and sprang higher and climbed more swiftly still. When Huygens's ears again permitted him to hear anything, there was only a diminishing mutter in the heavens, and a small bright speck of light ascending to the sky and swinging eastward as it rose to intercept the ship which had let it descend. The night noises of the jungle went on. Life on Lauren 2 did not need to heed the doings of men. But there was a spot of incandescence in the day-bright clearing, and a short, brisk man looked puzzledly about him with a travelling bag in his hand. Huygens advanced toward him as the incandescence dimmed. Sourdough and Sitka preceded him. Pharaoh Nell trailed faithfully, keeping a maternal eye on her offspring.
Switching sides.
The man in the clearing stared at the parade they made. It would be upsetting, even after preparation, to land at night on a strange planet and to have the ship's boat and all links with the rest of the cosmos depart, and then to find oneself approached, it might seem stalked, by two colossal male Kodiak bears with a third bear and a cub behind them.
Go, go, go.
A single human figure in such company might seem irrelevant. The new arrival gazed blankly. He moved, startledly. Then Huygens called, "Hello there. Don't worry about the bears. They're friends." Sitka reached the newcomer. He went warily downwind from him and sniffed. The smell was satisfactory. Man smell. Sitka sat down with a solid impact of more than a ton of bear meat landing on packed dirt. He regarded the man amiably. Sourdough said, "Whoosh," and went on to sample the air beyond the clearing. Huygens approached. The newcomer wore the uniform of the Colonial Survey. That was bad. It bore the insignia of a senior officer. Worse. "Ha," said the just-landed man. "Where are the robots? What in all the 19 hells are these creatures? Why did you shift your station? I'm Roan, here to make a progress report on your colony." Huygens said, "What colony?" "Lauren 2 robot installation." Then Roan said indignantly, "Don't tell me that idiot skipper dropped me off at the wrong place. This is Lauren 2, isn't it? And this is the landing field. But where are your robots? You should have the beginning of a grid up. What the devil's happened here, and what are these beasts?" Huygens grimaced. "This," he said politely, "is an illegal, unlicensed settlement. I'm a criminal. These beasts are my confederates. If you don't want to associate with criminals, you needn't, of course, but I doubt if you'll live till morning unless you accept my hospitality while I think over what to do about your landing. In reason, I ought to shoot you." Pharaoh Nell came to a halt behind Huygens, which was her proper post in all outdoor movement. Nugget, however, saw a new human. Nugget was a cub, and therefore friendly. He ambled forward ingratiatingly. He was 4 feet high at the shoulders, on all fours. He wriggled bashfully as he approached Roan. He sneezed because he was embarrassed. His mother overtook him swiftly and cuffed him to one side. He wailed. The wail of a 600-pound Kodiak bear cub is a remarkable sound. Roan gave ground a pace. "I think," he said carefully, "that we'd better talk things over. But if this is an illegal colony, of course you're under arrest, and anything you say will be used against you." Huygens grimaced again. "Right," he said. "But now if you'll walk close to me, we'll head back to the station. I'd have Sourdough carry your bag. He likes to carry things, but he may need his teeth. We're half a mile to travel." He turned to the animals. "Let's go," he said commandingly. "Back to the station. Hup!" Grunting, Sitka Pete arose and took up his duties as advanced point of a combat team. Sourdough trailed, swinging widely to one side and another. Huygens and Roan moved together. Pharaoh Nell and Nugget brought up the rear, which of course was the only relatively safe way for anybody to travel on Lauren 2, in the jungle, a good half-mile from one's fortress-like residence. But there was only one incident on the way back. It was a night walker, made hysterical by the lane of light. It poured through the underbrush, uttering cries like maniacal laughter. Sourdough brought it down, a good 10 yards from Huygens. When it was all over, Nugget bristled up to the dead creature, uttering cub growls. He feigned to attack it. His mother whacked him soundly. 2. There were comfortable settling-down noises below. The bears grunted and rumbled, but ultimately were still. The glare from the landing field was gone. The lighted lane through the jungle was dark again. Huygens ushered the man from the spaceboat up into his living quarters. There was a rustling stir, and Semper took his head from under his wing. He stared coldly at the two humans. He spread monstrous 7-foot wings and fluttered them. He opened his beak and closed it with a snap. "That's Semper," said Huygens. "Semper Tyrannis. He's the rest of the terrestrial population here. Not being a fly-by-night sort of creature, he didn't come out to welcome you." Roan blinked at the huge bird perched on a 3-inch thick perch set in the wall. "An eagle?" he demanded. "Kodiak bears. Mutated ones, you say, but still bears. And now an eagle? You've a very nice fighting unit in the bears." "They're pack animals too," said Huygens. "They can carry some hundreds of pounds without losing too much combat efficiency, and there's no problem of supply. They live off the jungle. Not Svexes, though. Nothing will eat a Svex, even if it can kill one." He brought out glasses and a bottle. He indicated a chair. Roan put down his travelling bag. He took a glass. "I'm curious," he observed. "Why Semper Tyrannis? I can understand Sitka Pete and Sourdough Charlie as names. The home of their ancestors makes them fitting. But why Semper?" "He was bred for hawking," said Huygens. "You sick a dog on something. You sick Semper Tyrannis. He's too big to ride on a hawking glove, so the shoulders of my coats are padded to let him ride there. He's a flying scout. I've trained him to notify us of Svexes, and in flight he carries a tiny television camera. He's useful, but he hasn't the brains of a bear's." Roan sat down and sipped at his glass. "Interesting. Very interesting. But this is an illegal settlement. I'm a colonial survey officer. My job is reporting on the progress according to plan, but nevertheless I have to arrest you. Didn't you say something about shooting me?" Huygens said doggedly, "I'm trying to think of a way out. Add up all the penalties for illegal colonization, and I'd be in a very bad fix if you got away and reported this setup. Shooting you would be logical." "I see that," said Roan reasonably. "But since the point has come up, I have a blaster trained on you from my pocket." Huygens shrugged. "It's rather likely that my human confederates will be back here before your friends. You'd be in a very tight fix if my friends came back and found you more or less sitting on my corpse." Roan nodded. "That's true too. Also, it's probable that your fellow terrestrials wouldn't cooperate with me if they have with you. You seem to have the whip hand, even with my blaster trained on you. On the other hand, you could have killed me quite easily after the boat left when I'd first landed. I'd have been quite unsuspicious. So you may not really intend to murder me." Huygens shrugged again. "So," said Roan, "since the secret of getting along with people is that of postponing quarrels, suppose we postpone the question of who kills whom. Frankly, I'm going to send you to prison if I can. Unlawful colonization is a very bad business. But I suppose you feel that you have to do something permanent about me. In your place I probably should too. Shall we declare a truce?" Huygens indicated indifference. Roan said vexedly, "Then I do. I have to. So." He pulled his hand out of his pocket and put a pocket blaster on the table. He leaned back defiantly. "Keep it," said Huygens. "Laurentu isn't a place where you live long unarmed." He turned to a cupboard. "Hungry?" "I could eat," admitted Roan. Huygens pulled out 2 meal packs from the cupboard and inserted them in the readier below. He set out plates. "Now, what happened to the official, licensed, authorized colony here?" asked Roan briskly. "License issued 18 months ago. There was a landing of colonists with a drone fleet of equipment and supplies. There have been 4 ship contacts since. There should be several thousand robots being industrious under adequate human supervision. There should be 100-mile square clearing planted with food plants for later human arrivals. There should be a landing grid at least half finished. Obviously, there should be a space beacon to guide ships to a landing. There isn't. There's no clearing visible from space. That Crete line ship has been in orbit for 3 days trying to find a place to drop me. Her skipper was fuming. Your beacon is the only one on the planet, and we found it by accident. What happened? Huygens served the food. He said dryly, there could be 100 colonies on this planet without anyone knowing of any other. I can only guess about your robots, but I suspect they ran into Sphinxes. Rowan paused with his fork in his hand. I read up on this planet, since I was to report on its colony. A Sphinx is part of the inimical animal life here. Cold-blooded, belligerent carnivore, not a lizard, but a genus all its own. Hunts in packs, 700 to 800 pounds when adult. Lethally dangerous, and simply too numerous to fight. There why no license was ever granted to human colonists. Only robots could work here, because they're machines. What animal attacks machines? Huygens said. What machine attacks animals? The Sphinxes wouldn't bother robots, of course. But would robots bother the Sphinxes? Rowan chewed and swallowed. Hold it! I'll agree that you can't make a hunting robot. A machine can discriminate, but it can't decide. That's why there's no danger of a robot revolt. They can't decide to do something for which they have no instructions. But this colony was planned with full knowledge of what robots can and can't do. As ground was cleared, it was enclosed in an electric fence which no Sphinx could touch without frying. Huygens thoughtfully cut his food. After a moment, the landing was in the winter time, he observed. It must have been, because the colony survived a while, and at a guess, the last ship landing was before Thor. The years are 18 months long here, you know, Rowan admitted. It was in winter that the landing was made, and the last ship landing was before spring. The idea was to get mines in operation for material, and to have ground cleared and enclosed in Sphinx-proof fence before the Sphinxes came back from the tropics. The winter there, I understand. Did you ever see a Sphinx? Huygens asked. Then added, no, of course not. But if you took a spitting cobra and crossed it with a wildcat, painted it tan and blue, and then gave it hydrophobia and homicidal mania at once, why, you might have one Sphinx, but not the race of Sphinxes. They can climb trees, by the way. A fence wouldn't stop them. An electrified fence, said Rowan. Nothing could climb that. No one animal, Huygens told him, but Sphinxes are a race. The smell of one dead Sphinx brings others running with blood in their eyes. Leave a dead Sphinx alone for 6 hours, and you've got them around by the dozen. 2 days, and there are hundreds. Longer, and you've got thousands of them. They gather to caterwaul over their dead pal, and hunt for whoever or whatever killed him. He returned to his meal. A moment later he said, no need to wonder what happened to your colony. During the winter, the robots burned out a clearing and put up an electrified fence according to the book. Come spring, the Sphinxes came back. They're curious, among their other madnesses. A Sphinx would try to climb the fence just to see what was behind it. He'd be electrocuted. His carcass would bring others, raging because a Sphinx was dead. Some of them would try to climb the fence and die, and their corpses would bring others. Presently the fence would break down from the bodies hanging on it, or a bridge of dead beasts' carcasses would be built across it, and from as far downwind as the scent carried there'd be loping, raging, scent-crazed Sphinxes racing to the spot. They'd pour into the clearing through or over the fence, squalling and screeching for something to kill. I think they'd find it. Rowan ceased to eat. He looked sick. There were pictures of Sphinxes in the data I read. I suppose that would account for everything. He tried to lift his fork. He put it down again. I can't eat, he said abruptly. Huygens made no comment. He finished his own meal, scowling. He rose and put the plates into the top of the cleaner. There was a whirring. He took them out of the bottom and put them away. Let me see those reports, eh? He asked dourly. I'd like to see what sort of a setup they had, those robots. Rowan hesitated, and then opened his travelling bag. There was a microviewer and reels of films. One entire reel was labelled Specifications for Construction Colonial Survey, which would contain detailed plans and all requirements of material and workmanship for everything from desks, office, administrative personnel, for use of, to landing grids, heavy gravity planets, lift capacity 100,000 Earth tons. But Huygens found another. He inserted it and spun the controls swiftly here and there, pausing only briefly at index frames until he came to the section he wanted. He began to study the information with growing impatience. Robots, 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 he snapped. Why don't they leave them where they belong, in cities to do the dirty work, and on airless planets where nothing unexpected ever happens? Robots don't belong in new colonies. Your colonists depended on them for defense. Damn it, let a man work with robots long enough, and he thinks all nature is as limited as they are. This is a plan to set up a controlled environment. On Lauren, too. Controlled environment. He swore luridly. Complacent, idiotic, desk-bound half-wits. Robots are all right, said Roan. We couldn't run civilization without them. But you can't tame a wilderness with them, snapped Huygens. You had a dozen men landed, with 50 assembled robots to start with. There were parts for 1,500 more, and I'll bet anything I've got that the ship contracts landed more still. They did, admitted Roan. I despise 'em, growled Huygens. I feel about 'em the way the old Greeks and Romans felt about slaves. They're for menial work, the sort of work a man will perform for himself, but that he won't do for another man for pay. Degrading work. Quite aristocratic, said Roan with a touch of irony. I take it that robots clean out the bear quarters downstairs. No, snapped Huygens. I do. They're my friends. They fight for me. They can't understand the necessity, and no robot would do the job right. He growled again. The noises of the night went on outside, organ tones and hiccupings, and the sound of tack hammers and slamming doors. Somewhere there was a singularly exact replica of the discordant squeaking of a rusty pump. I'm looking, said Huygens at the microviewer, for the record of the mining operations. An open pit operation wouldn't mean a thing, but if they had driven a tunnel and somebody was there supervising the robots when the colony was wiped out, there's an off chance he survived a while. Roan regarded him with suddenly intent eyes. And? Damn it, snapped Huygens. If so, I'll go see. They'd have no chance at all otherwise. Not that the chance is good in any case. Roan raised his eyebrows. I'm a colonial survey officer, he said. I've told you I'll send you to prison if I can. You've risked the lives of millions of people, maintaining non-quarantined communication with an unlicensed planet. If you did rescue somebody from the ruins of the robot colony, does it occur to you that there'd be witnesses to your unauthorized presence here? Huygens spun the viewer again. He stopped. He switched back and forth and found what he wanted. He muttered in satisfaction. They did run a tunnel. Aloud he said, I'll worry about witnesses when I have to. He pushed aside another cupboard door. Inside it were the odds and ends a man makes use of to repair the things about his house that he never notices until they go wrong. There was an assortment of wires, transistors, bolts, and similar stray items that a man living alone will need. When to his knowledge he's the only inhabitant of a solar system, he especially needs such things. What now? Asked Roan mildly. I'm going to try to find out if there's anybody left alive over there. I'd have checked before if I'd known the colony existed. I can't prove they're all dead, but I may prove that somebody's still alive. It's barely 2 weeks' journey away from here. Odd that 2 colonies picked spots so near. He absorbedly picked over the oddments he'd selected. Roan said vexedly, Confound it! How can you check whether somebody is alive some hundreds of miles away when you didn't know he existed half an hour ago?" Huygens threw a switch and took down a wall panel, exposing electronic apparatus and circuits behind. He busied himself with it. "Ever think about hunting for a castaway?" he asked over his shoulder. "There's a planet with some tens of millions of square miles on it. You know there's a ship down. You've no idea where. You assume the survivors have power. No civilized man will be without power very long as he can smelt metals. But making a space beacon calls for high-precision measurements and workmanship. It's not to be improvised. So what will your shipwrecked civilized man do to guide a rescue ship to the 1 or 2 square miles he occupies among some tens of millions on the planet?" Roan fretted visibly. "What?" "He's had to go primitive to begin with," Huygens explained. "He cooks his meat over a fire, and so on. He has to make a strictly primitive signal. It's all he can do without gauges and micrometers and with very special tools. But he can fill all the planet's atmosphere with a signal that searchers for him can't miss. You see?" Roan thought irritably. He shook his head. "He'll make," said Huygens, "a spark transmitter. He'll fix its output at the shortest frequency he can contrive. It'll be somewhere in the 5 to 50 meter wave band, but it will tune very broad, and it will be a plainly human signal. He'll start it broadcasting. Some of those frequencies will go all around the planet under the ionosphere. Any ship that comes in under the radio roof will pick up his signal, get a fix on it, move and get another fix, and then go straight to where the castaway is waiting placidly in a hand-braided hammock, sipping whatever sort of drink is improvised out of the local vegetation." Roan said grudgingly, "Now that you mention it, of course—" "My space phone picks up microwaves," said Huygens. "I'm shifting a few elements to make it listen for longer stuff. It won't be efficient, but it will pick up a distress signal if one's in the air. I don't expect it, though." He worked. Roan sat still a long time, watching him. Down below, a rhythmic sort of sound arose. It was Sourdough Charlie, snoring. He lay on his back with his legs in the air. He discovered that he slept cooler that way. Sitka Pete grunted in his sleep. He was dreaming. In the general room of the station, Semper, the eagle, blinked his eyes rapidly and then tucked his head under a gigantic wing and went to sleep. The noises of the Lauren II jungle came through the steel-shuttered windows. The nearer moon, which had passed overhead not long before the ringing of the arrival bell, again came soaring over the eastern horizon. It sped across the sky at the apparent speed of an atmosphere flyer. Overhead, it could be seen to be a jagged, irregular mass of rock or metal, plunging blindly about the great planet forever. Inside the station, Roan said angrily, "See here, Huygens, you've reason to kill me. Apparently you don't intend to. You've excellent reason to leave that robot colony strictly alone. But you're preparing to help, if there's anybody alive to need it. And yet you're a criminal, and I mean a criminal. There have been some ghastly bacteria exported from planets like Lauren II. There have been plenty of lives lost in consequence, and you're risking more. Why do you do it? Why do you do something that could produce monstrous results to other beings?" Huygens grunted. "You're only assuming there are no sanitary and quarantine precautions taken in my communications. As a matter of fact, there are. They're taken all right. As for the rest, you wouldn't understand." "I don't understand," snapped Roan, "but that's no proof I can't. Why are you a criminal?" Huygens painstakingly used a screwdriver inside the wall panel. He delicately lifted out a small electronic assembly. He carefully began to fit in a spaghettied new assembly with larger units. "I'm cutting my amplification here to hell and gone," he observed, "but I think it'll do. I'm doing what I'm doing," he added calmly. "I'm being a criminal because it seems to me befitting what I think I am. Everybody acts according to his own real notion of himself. You're a conscientious citizen and a loyal official and a well-adjusted personality. You consider yourself an intelligent, rational animal, but you don't act that way. You're reminding me of my need to shoot you or something similar, which a merely rational animal would try to make me forget. You happen, Roan, to be a man. So am I, but I'm aware of it. Therefore, I deliberately do things a merely rational animal wouldn't, because they're my notion of what a man who's more than a rational animal should do. He very carefully tightened one small screw after another. Roan said annoyedly, "Oh, religion." "Self-respect," corrected Huygens. "I don't like robots. They're too much like rational animals. A robot will do whatever it can that its supervisor requires it to do. A merely rational animal will do whatever it can that circumstances require it to do. I wouldn't like a robot unless it had some idea of what was befitting it and would spit in my eye if I tried to make it do something else. The bears downstairs now, they're no robots. They are loyal and honourable beasts, but they'd turn and tear me to bits if I tried to make them do something against their nature. Pharaoh Nell would fight me and all creation together if I tried to harm Nugget. It would be unintelligent and unreasonable and irrational. She'd lose out and get killed. But I like her that way. And I'll fight you and all creation when you make me try to do something against my nature. I'll be stupid and unreasonable and irrational about it." Then he grinned over his shoulder. "So will you, only you don't realize it." He turned back to his task. After a moment he fitted a manual control knob over a shaft in his haywire assembly. "What did somebody try to make you do?" asked Roan shrewdly. "What was demanded of you that turned you into a criminal? What are you in revolt against?" Huygens threw a switch. He began to turn the knob which controlled the knob of his makeshift modified receiver. "Why," he said amusedly, "when I was young, the people around me tried to make me into a conscientious citizen and a loyal employee and a well-adjusted personality. They tried to make me into a highly intelligent, rational animal, and nothing more. The difference between us, Roan, is that I found it out. Naturally, He stopped short. Faint, crackling, crisp frying sounds came from the speaker of the space phone now modified to receive what once were called short waves. Huygens listened. He cocked his head intently. He turned the knob very, very slowly. Then Roan made an arrested gesture to call attention to something in the sibilant sound. Huygens nodded. He turned the knob again with infinitesimal increments. Out of the background noise came a patterned mutter. As Huygens shifted the tuning, it grew louder. It reached a volume where it was unmistakable. It was a sequence of sounds like discordant buzzing. There were 3 half-second buzzings with half-second pauses between, a 2-second pause, 3 full-second buzzings with half-second pauses between, another 2-second pause, and 3 half-second buzzings again. Then silence for 5 seconds. Then the pattern repeated. "The devil!" said Huygens. "That's a human signal, mechanically made too. In fact, it used to be a standard distress call. It was termed an SOS, though I've no idea what that meant. Anyhow, somebody must have read old-fashioned novels sometime to know about it. And so someone is still alive over at your licensed but now smashed-up robot colony, and they're asking for help. I'd say they're likely to need it." He looked at Roan. "The intelligent thing to do is sit back and wait for a ship, either of my friends or yours. A ship that can help survivors or castaways much better than we can. A ship can even find them more easily. But maybe time is important to the poor devils. So I'm going to take the bears and see if I can reach them. You can wait here if you like. What say? Travel on Lauren 2 isn't a picnic. I'll be fighting nearly every foot of the way. There's plenty of inimical animal life here." Roan snapped angrily. "Don't be a fool. Of course I'm coming. What do you take me for? and 2 of us should have 4 times the chance of 1. Huygens grinned. Not quite. You forget Sitka Pete and Sourdough Charlie and Pharaoh Nell. There'll be 5 of us if you come instead of 4. And of course Nugget has to come, and he'll be no help. But Semper may make up for him. You won't quadruple our chances, Rowan, but I'll be glad to have you if you want to be stupid and unreasonable and not at all rational, and come along. 3. There was a jagged spur of stone looming precipitously over a river valley. 1,000 feet below, a broad stream ran westward to the sea. 20 miles to the east, a wall of mountains rose sheer against the sky. Its peaks seemed to blend into a remarkable evenness of height. There was rolling, tumbled ground between for as far as the eye could see. A speck in the sky came swiftly downward. Great pinions spread and flapped, and icy eyes surveyed the rocky space. With more great flappings, Semper the eagle came to ground. He folded his huge wings and turned his head jerkily, his eyes unblinking. A tiny harness held a miniature camera against his chest. He strutted over the bare stone to the highest point. He stood there, a lonely and arrogant figure in the vastness. There came crashings and rustlings, and then snuffling sounds. Sitka Pete came lumbering out into the clear space. He wore a harness too, and a pack. The harness was complex because it had not only to hold a pack in normal travel, but when he stood on his hind legs, it must not hamper the use of his forepaws in combat. He went cagily all over the open area. He peered over the edge of the spur's farthest tip. He prowled to the other side and looked down. He scouted carefully. Once he moved close to Semper, and the eagle opened its great curved beak and uttered an indignant noise. Sitka paid no attention. He relaxed, satisfied. He sat down untidily, his hind legs sprawling. He wore an air approaching benevolence as he surveyed the landscape about and below him. More snufflings and crashings. Sourdough Charlie came into view with Huygens and Rowan behind him. Sourdough carried a pack too. Then there was a squealing, and Nugget scurried up from the rear, impelled by a whack from his mother. Pharaoh Nell appeared, with the carcass of a stag-like animal lashed to her harness. "I picked this place from a space photo," said Huygens, "to make a directional fix from. I'll get set up." He swung his pack from his shoulders to the ground. He extracted an obviously self-constructed device which he set on the ground. It had a whip aerial which he extended. Then he plugged in a considerable length of flexible wire and unfolded a tiny improvised directional aerial with an even tinier booster at its base. Rowan slipped his pack from his shoulders and watched. Huygens slipped headphones over his ears. He looked up and said sharply, "Watch the bears, Rowan. The wind's blowing up the way we came. Anything that trails us, Svex's for example, will send its scent on before. The bears will tell us." He busied himself with the instruments he'd brought. He heard the hissing, frying background noise which could be anything at all except a human signal. He reached out and swung the small aerial around. Rasping, buzzing tones came in, faintly and then loudly. This receiver, though, had been made for this particular wave band. It was much more efficient than the modified space phone had been. It picked up 3 short buzzes, 3 long ones, and 3 short ones again. 3 dots, 3 dashes, and 3 dots. Over and over again. SOS, SOS, SOS. Huygens took a reading and moved the directional aerial a carefully measured distance. He took another reading. He shifted it yet again and again, carefully marking and measuring each spot and taking notes of the instrument readings. When he finished, he had checked the direction of the signal not only by loudness but by phase. He had as accurate a fix as could possibly be had with portable apparatus. Sourdough growled softly. Sitka Pete whiffed the air and arose from his sitting position. Faronel whacked Nugget, sending him whimpering into the farthest corner of the flea place. She stood bristling, facing downhill the way they'd come. "Damn," said Huygens. He got up and waved his arm at Semper, who had turned his head at the stirrings. Semper squawked in a most un-eagle-like fashion, and dived off the spur and was immediately fighting the downdraft beyond it. As Huygens reached his weapon, the eagle came back overhead. He went magnificently past, 100 feet high, careening and flapping in the tricky currents. He screamed abruptly, and circled, and screamed again. Huygens swung a tiny vision plate from its strap to where he could look into it. He saw, of course, what the little camera on Semper's chest could see, reeling, swaying terrain as Semper saw it, though without his breadth of field. There were moving objects to be seen through the shifting trees. The colouring was unmistakable. "Sphinxes," said Huygens dourly. 8 of them. Don't look for them to follow our track, Roan. They run parallel to a trail on either side. That way they attack in breadth and all at once when they catch up. And listen, the bears can handle anything they tangle with. It's our job to pick off the loose ones and aim for the body. The bullets explode." He threw off the safety of his weapon. Faronel, uttering thunderous growls, went padding to a place between Sitka Pete and Sourdough. Sitka glanced at her and made a whuffing noise, as if derisive of her blood-curdling sounds. Sourdough grunted in a somehow solid fashion. He and Sitka moved farther away from Nell to either side. They would cover a wider front. There was no other sign of life than the shrillings of the incredibly tiny creatures which on this planet were birds, and Faronel's deep bass, raging growls, and then the click of Roan's safety going off as he got ready to use the weapon Huygens had given him. Semper screamed again, flapping low above the treetops, following party-coloured, monstrous shapes beneath. 8 blue and tan fiends came racing out of the underbrush. They had spiny fringes and horns and glaring eyes, and they looked as if they had come straight out of hell. On the instant of their appearance, they leaped, emitting squalling, spitting squeals that were like the cries of fighting tomcats 10,000 times magnified. Huygens' rifle cracked, and its sound was wiped out in the louder detonation of its bullet in Sphexian flesh. A tan and blue monster tumbled over, shrieking. Faronel charged, the very impersonation of white-hot fury. Rowan fired, and his bullet exploded against a tree. Sitka Pete brought his massive forepaws in a clapping, monstrous ear-boxing motion. A Sphex died. Then Rowan fired again. Sourdough Charlie whuffed. He fell forward upon a spitting, bicoloured fiend, rolled him over, and raked with his hind claws. The belly hide of the Sphex was tenderer than the rest. The creature rolled away, snapping at its own wounds. Another Sphex found itself shaken loose from the tumult about Sitka Pete. It whirled to leap on him from behind, and Huygens fired very coldly, and 2 plunged upon Faronel, and Rowan blasted one, and Faronel disposed of the other in truly awesome fury. Then Sitka Pete heaved himself erect, seeming to drip Sphyxes, and Sourdough waddled over and pulled one off and killed it and went back for another. And both rifles cracked together, and there was suddenly nothing left to fight. The bears prowled from one to another of the corpses. Sitka Pete rumbled and lifted up a limp head. Crash! Then another. He went over the lot, whether or not they showed signs of life. When he had finished, they were wholly still. Semper came flapping down out of the sky. He had screamed and fluttered overhead as the fight went on. Now he landed with a rush. Huygens went soothingly from one bear to another, calming them with his voice. It took longest to calm Faronel, licking Nugget with impassioned solicitude and growling horribly as she licked. "Come along now," said Huygens, when Sitka showed signs of intending to sit down again. "Heave these carcasses over a cliff. Come along, Sitka, Sourdough, hup!" He guided them as the two big males somewhat fastidiously lifted up the nightmarish creatures they and their guns together had killed, and carried them to the edge of the spur of stone. They let the dead beasts go bouncing and sliding down into the valley. "That," said Huygens, "is so the little pals will gather round them and caterwaul their woe where there's no trail of ours to give them ideas. If we'd been near a river, I'd have dumped them in to float down river and gather mourners wherever they stranded. Around the station I incinerate them. If I had to leave them, I'd make tracks away. About 50 miles upwind would be a good idea." He opened the pack Sourdough carried and extracted giant-sized swabs and some gallons of antiseptic. He tended the 3 Kodiaks in turn, swabbing not only the cuts and scratches they'd received, but deeply soaking their fur where there could be suspicion of spilled Sphex blood. "This antiseptic deodorizes too," he told Roan, "or we'd be trailed by any Sphex who passed to leeward of us. When we start off, I'll swab the bear's paws for the same reason." Roan was very quiet. He'd missed his first shot with a bullet-firing weapon. A beam hasn't the stopping power of an explosive bullet. But he'd seemed to grow savagely angry with himself. The last few seconds of the fight, he'd fired very deliberately, and every bullet hit. Now he said bitterly, "If you're instructing me so I can carry on should you be killed, I doubt that it's worthwhile." Huygens felt in his pack and unfolded the enlargements he had made of the space photos of this part of the planet. He carefully oriented the map with the distant landmarks. He drew a painstaking, accurate line across the photo. "The SOS signal comes from somewhere close to the robot colony," he reported. "I think a little to the south of it. Probably from a mine they'd opened up, on the far side, of course, of the Sear Plateau. See how I've marked this map? 2 fixes, one from the station and one from here. I came away off course to get a fix here so we'd have 2 position lines to the transmitter. The signal could have come from the other side of the planet, but it doesn't." "The odds would be astronomically against other castaways," protested Roan. "No," said Huygens. "Ships have been coming here. To the robot colony. One could have crashed. And I have friends too." He repacked his apparatus and gestured to the bears. He led them beyond the scene of combat and very carefully swabbed off their paws so they could not possibly leave a trail of Sphex blood scent behind them. He waved Semper, the eagle, aloft. "Let's go," he told the Kodiaks. "Yonder, hup!" The party headed downhill and into the jungle again. Now it was Sourdough's turn to take the lead, and Sitka Pete prowled more widely behind him. Pharaoh Nell trailed the men, with Nugget. She kept an extremely sharp eye upon the cub. He was a baby still. He only weighed 600 pounds. And of course she watched against danger from the rear. Overhead, Semper fluttered and flew in giant circles and spirals, never going very far away. Huygens referred constantly to the screen which showed what the airborne camera saw. The image tilted and circled and banked and swayed. It was by no means the best air reconnaissance that could be imagined, but it was the best that would work. Presently Huygens said, "We swing to the right here. The going's bad straight ahead, and it looks like a pack of Sphex has killed and is feeding." Rowan was upset. He was dissatisfied with himself. So he said, "It's against reason for carnivores to be as thick as you say. There has to be a certain amount of other animal life for every meat-eating beast. Too many of them would eat all the game and starve." "They're gone all winter," explained Huygens, "which around here isn't as severe as you might think. And a good many animals seem to breed just after the Sphex go south. Also, the Sphex aren't around all the warm weather. There's a sort of peak, and then for a matter of weeks you won't see a one of them, and suddenly the jungle swarms with them again. Then presently they head south. Apparently they're migratory in some fashion, but nobody knows." He said dryly, "There haven't been many naturalists around on this planet. The animal life is inimical. Roan fretted. He was a senior officer in the Colonial Survey, and he was accustomed to arrival at a partly or completely finished colonial setup, and to pass upon the completion or non-completion of the planned installation as designed. Now he was in an intolerably hostile environment, depending upon an illegal colonist for his life, engaged upon a demoralizingly indefinite enterprise, because the mechanical spark signal could be working long after its constructors were dead, and his ideas about a number of matters were shaken. He was alive, for example, because of 3 giant Kodiak bears and a bald eagle. He and Roan could have been surrounded by 10,000 robots, and they'd been killed. Sphinxes and robots would have ignored each other, and Sphinxes would have made straight for the men, who would have had less than 4 seconds in which to discover for themselves that they were attacked, prepare to defend themselves, and kill 8 Sphinxes. Roan's convictions as a civilized man were shaken. Robots were marvelous contrivances for doing the expected, accomplishing the planned, coping with the predicted. But they also had defects. Robots could only follow instructions. If this thing happens, do this. If that thing happens, do that. But before something else, neither this or that, robots were helpless. So a robot civilization worked only in an environment where nothing unanticipated ever turned up, and human supervisors never demanded anything unexpected. Roan was appalled. He'd never encountered the truly unpredictable before in all his life and career. He found Nugget, the cub, ambling uneasily in his wake. The cub flattened his ears miserably when Roan glanced at him. It occurred to the man that Nugget was receiving a lot of disciplinary thumpings from Faronel. He was knocked about physically, pretty much as Roan was being knocked about psychologically. His lack of information and unfitness for independent survival in this environment was being hammered into him. "Hi, Nugget," said Roan ruefully. "I feel just about the way you do." Nugget brightened visibly. He frisked. He tended to gamble. He looked very hopefully up into Roan's face, and he stood 4 feet high at the shoulder and would overtop Roan if he stood erect. Roan reached out and patted Nugget's head. It was the first time in all his life that he'd ever petted an animal. He heard a snuffling sound behind him. Skin crawled at the back of his neck. He whirled. Faronel regarded him, 1,800 pounds of she-bear only 10 feet away and looking into his eyes. For one panicky instant, Roan went cold all over. Then he realized that Faronel's eyes were not burning. She was not snarling. She did not emit those blood-curdling sounds which the bare prospect of danger to Nugget had produced up on the rocky spur. She looked at him blandly. In fact, after a moment, she swung off on some independent investigation of a matter that had aroused her curiosity. The travelling party went on, Nugget frisking beside Roan and tending to bump into him out of pure cub clumsiness. Now and again he looked adoringly at Roan in the instant and overwhelming affection of the very young. Roan trudged on. Presently he glanced behind again. Faronel was now ranging more widely. She was well satisfied to have Nugget in the immediate care of a man. From time to time he got on her nerves. A little while later, Roan called ahead. "Huygens, look here. I've been appointed nursemaid to Nugget." Huygens looked back. "Oh, slap him a few times and he'll go back to his mother." "The devil I will," said Roan querulously. "I like it." The travelling party went on. When night fell, they camped. There could be no fire, of course, because all the minute night things about would come eagerly to dance in the glow. But there could not be darkness equally, because night walkers hunted in the dark. So Huygens set out the barrier lamps, which made a wall of twilight about their halting place, and the stag-like creature Faronel had carried became their evening meal. Then they slept. At least the men did, and the bears dozed and snorted and waked and dozed again. But Semper sat immobile with his head under his wing on a tree limb, and presently there was a glorious cool hush, and all the world glowed in morning light diffused through the jungle by a newly risen sun. And they arose and travelled again. This day they stopped stock still for 2 hours while Sphinxes puzzled over the trail the bears had left. Huygens discoursed calmly on the need for an anti-scent to be used on the boots of men and the paws of bears, which would make the following of the trails unpopular with Sphinxes. And Roan seized upon the idea and absorbedly suggested that a Sphinx-repellent odour might be worked out, which would make a human revolting to a Sphinx. If that were done, why, humans could go freely about unmolested. Like stink bugs, said Huygens sardonically. A very intelligent idea, very rational. You can feel proud. And suddenly Roan, very obscurely, was not proud of the idea at all. They camped again. On the third night they were at the base of that.
Hagakure is a classic on samurai ethics, emphasizing honor, duty, and loyalty.
Let's go.
Understand the meaning of Bushido.
Go, go, go.
I have discovered that Bushido, the way of the warrior, lies in dying. When faced with the two options of life and death, one should choose death without hesitation. This is not difficult. One just needs to pursue this goal with firm determination. Some claim that death is meaningless if one has not fulfilled their destiny. This is a calculating way of thinking that stems from the vain, urbanized version of Bushido. When squeezed between two alternatives, it is hard to choose the right one. To be safe, everyone prefers life over death, trying to convince themselves with the reason of their own survival. If one survives without achieving a just end, they are a coward. Here lies the crucial point. As long as someone chooses death without having reached their goal, their death is free from shame, even if others may call it meaningless or insane. This is the essence of Bushido. If someone prepares for death every morning and evening and expects death at every moment, Bushido is their own path. Some people can rely on their natural talent for spontaneous decisions, while others have to rack their brains hard in bed to reach a final solution. Every man is born with a different measure of wisdom. One discovers wisdom within themselves that they never even dreamed of when they think clearly about their own ego and act based on the 4 vows. Even though everyone likes to believe they can solve the most difficult problems through serious thinking, it leads to values that are based on their own ego, resulting in nothing but evil and useless ideas. No matter how hard one thinks, limited people can rarely turn off their subjective way of looking at things. When someone faces a serious problem, they must first set it aside for a while, recall the basics cited in the 4 vows, and decide free from their ego. This prepares them against serious misjudgments. Recognize the limits of your own wisdom. One tends to try hard to judge every situation with the little wisdom they have, and thus cope with it, which breeds evil, egocentric thoughts against providence and turns into vice in the eyes of outsiders. Such wisdom is dirty, pathetic, and narrow-minded. Not least, it is too dull to allow spontaneous action. If no important idea comes to mind, it is better to ask a wise person for advice. The wise person, who is not personally involved, can judge the case selflessly and openly. Such a judgment is firm and convincing, impressing others, and can be compared to a huge tree nourished by many strong roots. In contrast, a judgment born from limited wisdom is like a lonely tree in the barren teachings of a vast field. A man who is in harmony with his lord, Sagar Kuma, an opponent of thousands, had long given up his life. His heart was in harmony with his lord's. Once, Prince Sakio, who could not stand the lord, held a secret meeting where it was decided to force Kuma to death by seppuku, causing Lord Matsusige to lose the minister he trusted most. Kuma got wind of this, rented a 3-story tea house on the Takuinu estate, gathered a bunch of ruffians and staged a noisy puppet show. Kuma even operated the puppets himself. The wild drinking party at Prince Sakyo's estate lasted for days and nights. The intention behind this improper behavior was to discredit himself and dishonor his lord so that he could face the planned seppuku with dignity. Be careful with reproaches towards others. Making accusations. It is easy to find the good and evil in another person. Similarly, it is easy to criticize them for their faults. Many people think it is appropriate to openly give advice to others and give up if the advice is not accepted. This benefits no one because others are only exposed to shame and loss of face. Before giving advice to another, one must first determine if the other person is in a suitable state, meaning they have an open mind for instruction. Then become familiar with them so that they trust the advisor. Occasionally attract the other's attention by addressing their inclinations and other interests. Carefully choose the best time and method. Let the intended instructions sink in casually without directly lecturing. This can be achieved through occasional letters, farewell visits, or discreet conversations about one's own flaws and mistakes. True instruction lies in allowing the admonition to be swallowed naturally, like a thirsty throat absorbs water. The other person experiences a liberation from their faults after being first encouraged by praising their strengths. Teaching is a difficult task. I know from personal experience that errors, which are usually long-lasting, cannot be corrected through usual means. True greatness and compassion are revealed when the followers of a clan come together in brotherhood, correct each other's weaknesses, and strive to serve their lord in harmony. How can someone achieve this ultimate goal if they only expose others to shame? Suppressing a sneeze in the presence of others is improper. When an unexpected sneeze occurs, rub your forehead with your hand from bottom to top, which is usually enough to suppress the sneeze. If that doesn't work, hide the sneeze from others by licking your lips with your tongue and hiding the sneeze behind your sleeve or hand. The same applies to sneezing. Sneezing and coughing often make you look foolish. There are many other things you must pay attention to in order to behave properly. Be an attentive guest. It is advisable to think about and note down what needs to be done the next day. The Lord would surely study the man he wants to visit the next day carefully, select appropriate greetings and conversation topics, and so on. When accompanying your Lord on a visit or going alone for a conversation, you should think carefully in advance about the host to avoid insults during the visit. This is the way to harmony between people and social courtesy. If someone is invited by a high-ranking man or a similar dignitary, they cannot be good company if they feel very tense before the visit. The right way is to be sincerely grateful for the occasion and look forward to the upcoming meeting with great joy. In general, one should not make uninvited visits unless absolutely necessary. It is very important for a guest to prepare for a visit by imagining the planned company beforehand. In a drinking party or similar event, it is most important to consider when to excuse yourself and leave. I do not want to see people bored by leaving too late, but also not too early, which could ruin an enjoyable meeting. Usually, too much restraint is inappropriate. If you are invited to a dinner and the host has offered the meal once or twice, it is better to accept the kindness. By swearing never to backbite others on the warrior's path, one also decides to make their military bravery known to all people on earth and be useful to their lord. This means instructing the lord in better clan management after being promoted to advisor. The duties of the son go hand in hand with loyalty to one's own lord. They are naturally meant to work for the good of others, which means striving to make all other men useful followers of their lord. Be prepared for any situation. Military tactics and strategy are determined by capable and incapable men. The former are not only experienced, but also ready to solve every problem in a commendable way at the decisive moment. They are nourished by their unique study of various standards for a multitude of circumstances. These are men who are prepared for any situation. On the other hand, the others do not think about the possibilities in advance. When they solve a problem, it is nothing but a lucky coincidence. Proper conduct with drinking. One cannot be careful enough with their behavior. As I observed at various festivals, most men bend over nothing more than their drinks. If someone drinks when they should, it is allowed. At any other time, they look shameful and clumsy, and their daily mental habits and even their true character are revealed. Be clear that a festival is a public function. Always being alone makes one lonely. A certain elder follower preached extreme frugality in all areas of life. However, an old wisdom says that a too clear stream is avoided by fish. Fish can survive and grow by hiding under water lilies or other underwater plants. Only when a superior overlooks the small flaws of his men can they live in a peaceful spirit. Vitality comes first. When I, Yasabudo, had a poem written on a rectangular card, I spoke about vitality in calligraphy with the following words. Imagine you would write only one word across the entire card, as if you were tearing the card with your brush. Whether your calligraphy is presentable or not depends on your energy. All that is required of a samurai is that he feels full of life energy and not tired or negligent. Effeminate men, as Dr. Matsukuma Mai Nokan is said to have, in medicine, men and women are divided into positive and negative in different ways. Even a man's pulse is different from a woman's. However, in the past 50 years, this difference in pulses has disappeared. With this phenomenal change, I began to treat men's eye diseases like those of women because I could not make a successful prognosis with male patients. Those I treated with men's medicine made it clear that they had lost their male spirit. I kept this fact a secret to myself. So, most men today evidently have a feminine pulse. Only a few men really look masculine, making it easy for true men to surpass others with little effort.
Match found.
Spectators see more than players. Driven by the aversion to injustice. Achieving justice is difficult. Continuously seeking justice based on one's own belief often leads to serious mistakes because the truth lies far beyond the reach of the judiciary and is hard to find unless someone is equipped with the highest wisdom. If someone cannot find the truth themselves, there is still a way to reach it by asking others for advice. Even a man who can never hope to attain the truth can very well analyze someone else's affairs. Just as it is often said by spectators in the game of Go, spectators see more than the game. Although a proverb states, always think alone to realize that you are mistaken, a difficult matter can best be handled by asking others for advice. Learning through listening and reading means following the wise thoughts of old men. There is no end to lifelong practice. An acquaintance who is a swordsman expressed his viewpoint in old age as follows. Lifelong practice has its various stages. The untalented will never reach a point where, regardless of the practice they undergo, their skills appear pathetic to both others and themselves. Their abilities are of no use at all. On the next level are the less talented who are not quite useful and are dissatisfied with their poor performance, yet they also recognize the clumsy actions of others. In contrast, the talented ones, whose abilities are usable and who can make every ounce of art their own, are proud of their skills and annoyed by the incomplete abilities of others. Those above the talented deceive with their ignorance. However, other people can still acquire their true abilities. So, a person can normally progress far beyond this stage when practicing any art. Beyond that lies the highest level, where one ascends to the very last sphere of an art. Once there, one realizes in the perpetual awareness of one's own imperfect abilities that there is no end to practicing an art. Thus the master lives their life aware of their imperfection, never satisfied with their skills, not even on their very last day. I do not know how to defeat others. I only know how to conquer myself. Lifelong practice knows no end. Things of great importance should be approached calmly. A rule left by Lord Nao Chige in a writing on a wall reads, "Things of great importance should be approached calmly. Things of little importance should be approached seriously." Matters of great importance should only occur daily in such small numbers that they can be addressed. This rule seems to advise formulating decisions on serious matters in advance and finally making the decision easily when facing the matter. On the other hand, if someone does not make decisions, their resolve can hardly succeed at the decisive moment. I believe that daily practiced decisiveness is the prerequisite for the rule. Things of great importance should be approached calmly. A man who never makes a mistake cannot be trusted. Once, at a meeting, the possible promotion of a certain follower was considered. The members unanimously wanted to reject the proposed promotion because of the man's past drinking problem. However, there was something to consider. If a man is never considered again after a past mistake, it stifles talented men at the source. A man who has once failed regrets his mistake, acts henceforth discreetly, and is always ready to be useful to his lord. Therefore, such a man should receive an appropriate promotion. I believe in his reliable service precisely because he has failed once. On the other hand, a man who has never made a mistake is, in my eyes, risky.
I'm out of here.
How to fight in a street battle.
Go, go, go.
A samurai was once forced into a fight but did not take revenge on the opposing side, thereby earning the contempt of those who saw it as a disgrace. To settle matters with an enemy, one must simply thrust into the enemy and be killed. This way, one's own death is free from shame. If someone tends only to think about winning a duel, they miss the right moment to act. People avoid retaliation with the excuse that they are outnumbered and only waste valuable time, until they eventually talk about completely giving up revenge. One should confront their enemies, firmly determined to slaughter one after another, no matter how many thousands of enemies there may be. This enables them to fulfill their desire for revenge, and in most cases, they will themselves be the victor. Listening to others and consulting books. Listening to others and consulting books means preparing for the decisive moment that can come at any time. By practicing Bushido, one should be prepared day and night for everything. Be aware of the always uncertain life and think about which action in what form is appropriate in the decisive moment. Chance plays a role in a duel. The way to preserve oneself from fear and pain in a duel is on a different sheet than the mere question of victory or defeat. The former only requires the determination to never flee before death. If someone is defeated, they should immediately retaliate on the spot to match their enemy. This requires neither brains nor technique. A man of great bravery does not think about the end of a fight. He passionately rushes into the jaws of death where his true self is revealed in his mindset. Do not think yourself established. A man who thinks he is already established is unwise. A man who is satisfied with fixed opinions he gained through considerable effort has already fallen into a trap. Both men should strive much more first to attain a fundamental attitude towards skills and make lifelong efforts towards the ultimate goal without a moment of self-satisfaction with the little they have discovered. They should always consider their achieved results as unsatisfactory and not good enough, and continue to explore the right path to mastery throughout their lives. The truth lies nowhere else but on this path of striving. Thoughts from my father. Here are a few things my father, Yamamoto Jinoeman, said or did. 1. When someone understands one reason, many more will open before their eyes.
Go, go, go.
2. A man with an affected smile is ordinary and cowardly. 3. Whether you speak at an official occasion or a casual one, always look the listener directly in the eyes. A polite bow at the beginning is enough. Speaking with downcast eyes is dangerous. 4. It is not safe to sink your own hands into wide sleeves when sitting. 5. Whenever I read a book, whether it was a collection of stories in kana or a classic in Chinese script, my father threw it into the fire. He said, "The court should read." Members of the Nakan family should practice military courage with a wooden sword in hand as a sign of relentless practice.
Go, go.
6. A man who does not lead a fighting group and is without a horse is not a samurai.
Spike line.
7. My father got up early at 4 a.m., took a cold bath, shaved his forehead every morning, had breakfast at sunrise, and went to bed at sunset.
You will not.
Changes in values over the past 30 years. Up until 50 or 60 years ago, a samurai took a bath every morning, shaved his forehead, scented his hair with incense, cut his nails, polished them with pumice stone, and smoothed them with sorrel. He was very careful not to neglect his appearance. He cleaned his weapons and kept them polished and free from rust. Today, this special attention to one's own grooming might seem too affected, but it does not stem from any romantic idea. Ready to die in battle every day, young and old samurai were well groomed because otherwise their dead bodies would surely be despised by the enemy on a battlefield, contrary to their wish to be prepared for everything. Even if this custom seems complicated and time-consuming, it precisely describes what is expected of a samurai. There is nothing special else that requires more effort or time. One remains free from shame as long as one is determined to die at any moment or already considers oneself dead and is seriously committed to both their service and the practice of military virtue. In the past 30 years, many changes have occurred. Whenever young samurai meet, they only talk about other people's financial wealth and loss, their household budget, clothing and sex. Without such topics, they feel tense. If someone chooses a good model in calligraphy and works hard to imitate it, their hand will initially be unsure, but soon make pleasing progress. A follower can also orient themselves towards an outstanding warrior. Although exemplary followers who surpass others in everything are very hard to find nowadays, one can choose various men, each excelling in a different virtue such as manners, bravery, speaking style, good behavior, loyalty, and quick decisiveness. Students of all directions tend to imitate the unfinished traits of their teachers instead of emulating their strengths, leading to no fruitful results. This also applies to a follower who chooses a teacher that has good manners but is disloyal, and then imitates the unfaithful side of their character instead of their good manners. Discover the strong character traits of other people and follow them. This way, anyone, no matter who they are, can become a good example and teacher. Words of encouragement. When visiting a man who is suffering from misfortune to comfort him, the first word of the visitor is of utmost importance because it reveals their true intentions. A samurai who appears to be despondent and worried in any situation is a failure. He is useless if he's not seriously ready to strive for victory by all means. Therefore, a depressed person must be uplifted. Be friendly to visitors. Be friendly to visitors even when you are busy. Sometimes, someone visits an office at the busiest time and discusses their concerns without seeming to sense the hectic atmosphere. In such cases, Where officials often react grumpily and angrily to visitors, the samurai code dictates handling the visitors' affairs calmly and thoughtfully. A dismissive reception of visitors is only fitting for the lowly populace. An old veteran once told me that if someone is focused day and night on surpassing successful samurai and killing strong enemies in war, they can keep their fire of courage alive and prove their bravery free from discouragement. Even in times of peace, one should maintain this attitude. Educate your child. There are certain ways a samurai should educate their child. 1. Build their courage without ever threatening or deceiving them. A heart awakened to fear once will never leave the child until the end of their days. It remains with them as their essential flaw. 2. Foolish parents shy away, making their children fearful of thunderstorms, scared of the dark, and telling them horrible stories. By doing so, they commit unforgivable mistakes in child rearing. A child will lag in development if scolded too much. 3. Do not instill bad habits in the child.
30 seconds left.
4. Pay attention to their language and behavior.
Gotta go.
A child raised properly can grow into a useful adult with an ordinary character. It is only natural that children of unhappy married parents will gain nothing from them. Even birds and wild animals are shaped by what they see and hear. Pay attention to your words. A man with weak conviction can easily be swayed by others to their side. During a meeting, you might sometimes hear people shout out, especially when someone is fascinated by another man who carelessly speaks about something he hasn't thought through. A third party will surely interpret such a word as agreement. Therefore, you must always be on guard whenever you meet others. When you express your opinion, you should handle the conversation in a way that prevents yourself from being taken over, and be ready to reject ideas that oppose your own. Even in an insignificant matter, a seemingly overlooked detail can be a trap if you are not always vigilant. Beware of questionable friends. It is wise not to become too friends with a man of questionable character, so that you are not taken over and entangled in his twisted thinking. Years of experience are needed to keep oneself free from such mistakes. Do not be a perfect technician. A proverb fits no one better than the samurai of other clans. Expertise is of lifelong benefit to its owner in our clan, but it only ruins the life of the samurai. A man who perfects an art is a technician, not a samurai. Strive to be called a samurai. Remember that skills can only help a man fulfill his duty if he understands that a special talent poses a danger to the existence of a true samurai.
30 seconds left.
Fear no misfortune. A man who is always prepared for death can surely die a peaceful death.
Spike planted.
Misfortune is not as terrible as we imagine it to be beforehand, so it is foolish to torment oneself with thoughts of disasters yet to come. Never forget that the worst fate of a follower is still dismissal from service or forced suicide through seppuku. Recognize the true nature of good and evil. The setbacks in a person's life cannot be attributed to their good or evil. The rise and fall of a person lie in the nature of things, while their good and evil depend on earthly judgment by humans. People tend to see the highs and lows of others as consequences of virtue and vice.
Gotta go.
Look in the mirror. It is advisable to get into the habit of looking in the mirror to arrange your own appearance. After I was instructed at the age of 13 to let a forehead lock grow during my captivity, I withdrew to my house for about a year because my relatives told me that as clever as I looked, I would surely stand out unpleasantly sooner or later. Our Lord cannot tolerate clever faces. When people met me after that year, seeing me constantly improving my appearance in solitary seclusion in front of the mirror, they called me sick and weak. So I knew that my qualifications for follower service were now complete. A man with a clever expression. Others do not trust a man with a clever expression if he does not have a strong spirit within himself. His appearance is not a pleasant sight. A respectful, strict, and calm man is best. Despise calculating cowards. Those who work for selfish gain are cowards. The reason is that a calculating person who constantly weighs gain and loss against each other cannot break free from this thought pattern, which is why he views death as a loss and life as a gain. He hates death, which makes him a coward. Educated people hide character traits like cowardice and greed through cleverness and eloquence, a disguise that only leads others to madness.
Gotta go.
Desperate battles.
Go, go, go.
Desperate battles, or Bushido, mean fighting desperately in the throat of death. Lord Naoij himself commented that dozens of men sometimes find it hard to kill a single samurai in this wild state. One cannot expect a man of ordinary, healthy mind to achieve great things. Only when he brings himself into an almost crazy, desperate state, far beyond reason and self-interest, can he accomplish such feats. Likewise, a man who is once hindered by restraint falls far behind others in practicing Bushido, because Bushido requires no special thoughts of loyalty or childlike piety, but only desperate fighting, in which loyalty and childlike piety can, of course, spontaneously arise. Whoever observes a master of his art and listens to him, and then concludes that he can never match him, is a weakling. Whoever does not feel inferior to the master, that is, to another person, and aligns his heart entirely towards mastery, has already set his feet on the path of perfection. Confucius deserved his name when he directed his heart to learning at the age of 15. Years of study followed before he became a wise man. A Buddhist scripture says that when someone is awakened to Buddhism, the teachings of Buddha already live in their mind. Pay attention to your language. The samurai must be prepared for everything to avoid showing the slightest twitch. If you do not pay attention to your language, you might blabber something like, "I am afraid." In such a case, you might say, "I will surely flee, that is terrible," or "it hurts terribly." Neither in sleep nor in a playful conversation should a samurai allow himself to utter such words. If they are heard by an attentive man, he can easily recognize the thoughts at the core of the heart of such a carefree speaker. Therefore, always be on guard. Be decisive. An old proverb says, "Think sharply and decide within 7 breaths." Lord Naochige was heard to say that in 7 out of 10 cases, things executed hesitantly turn out to be wrong. From the samurai, quick action is expected. In everything he undertakes, a confused mind leads to no clear decision. A man without nagging doubts and with a fresh and high spirit can come to a decision within 7 breaths. Be quick-witted and determined when making a decision. Whatever talent one is gifted with, one cannot perform good service if not recognized by others. No one can hate a man who strives to be useful, who loves his service, works hard, and is always ready to work with his companions. Avoid promotion. Avoid promotion while you are young and serving as a useful samurai. When one is still young, it cannot bring fruitful results. No matter how brilliant a young man may naturally be, his ability is not yet mature enough to convince others. Therefore, it is better to gradually rise in rank around the age of 50. Surpass others by listening to their advice. The best way to surpass others is by sincerely letting them criticize your own affairs and asking them for advice. For most people, only their own opinion counts, so you cannot surpass others. A samurai who writes much better than I showed me once an official document he had written to another to seek his advice. The fact that he asked another man to review and correct the writing shows that he was already ahead of the other. Pure and simple, in no exercise can there be a stage where someone thinks they have achieved everything. Such a feeling of perfection stands against the practice of the way. A man who was dissatisfied with his results all his life, though he practiced wholeheartedly until his last breath, retrospectively achieved his goal to become pure and simple and to cultivate concentration. Pursuing more than one goal is a difficult life task. Pursuing a goal will never lead a person on the path unless it is done in a pure and clear mind.
Teleport's ready.
Move heaven and earth. Nothing is impossible in this world. A firm decision can move heaven and earth, they say. Some things seem far beyond a person's power because he cannot direct his heart towards a difficult project due to a lack of strong will. It entirely depends on one's mental attitude, even moving heaven and earth without applying one's own strength. Be humble. There are many who want to teach, and only a few who want to listen. Even fewer people stick to the lessons already given. When a man is already in his 30s, no one will dare to admonish him, so he tends to follow his own path and repeats his misdeeds and foolishness. Therefore, you must surround yourself with reasonable people and listen to their teachings. Listen and fear no mistakes. A follower who does not love his duty fulfillment in follower service is commendable. A follower who is afraid of a big assignment and asks to be released from it is evasive and unmanly. If someone fails a mission despite great effort, the failure resembles an honorable death in a desperate battle. Always be humble like in the first meeting. If all people live in a society in harmony and leave their existence to the way of heaven, they will surely live comfortably and in peace. A man who does not live in harmony with others cannot be considered loyal to the Lord. Whatever noble principle he claims for himself, those who stand poorly with others and even avoid irregular meetings or just talk about it will all be determined by their narrow thinking. Even if a man disagrees with another, a warm greeting is expected whenever he meets the other. He should be prepared to arrange with the other so that repeated meetings do not become boring, and always think about a possible moment when a friendly relationship might be urgently needed. In this fleeting world where no one can be sure of their life, it would be embarrassing to die suddenly when others are thinking badly of you. One should not end up as a money-hungry monk or a crazy or extremely despicable and selfish creature. Do not compete unnecessarily with them. Stay polite and humble and handle things thoughtfully for the good of others, because this ensures unfaltering friendly relationships in every meeting as if it were the first time.
Go, go, go.
In my youth, I kept a repentant diary to note my daily mistakes. Not a day passed without me writing down 20-30 errors. Facing this inevitable parade of blunders, I finally gave up the diary. Even now, when I lie in bed thinking about what I did during the day, there are at least a few mistakes that slipped into my words or actions, making me realize what an imperfect person I am. A man who is too taken with his cleverness cannot reflect in this way.
Didn't come here to
Loyalty and childlike piety are shown by a loyal follower. In the samurai's house, doing his son's duty, as a proverb says, one should be thoroughly dutiful to their parents and regret not having done more for them when they have died. Since many followers naturally tend to exhaust themselves in the service of their lords, few care about their son's duty. Loyalty and childlike piety only show up when the lord and parents act unreasonably. When they are reasonable and well-disposed, even a stranger behaves kindly towards them. The monk Gensei secretly went to the fishmonger at sunset and then brought the fish, hidden under his mother's robe. His devotion and loyalty to his parents go far beyond what is usual. About Shudo. Men often make lifelong mistakes because of Shudo, homosexual relationships in their youth. Nowadays, it seems no one tells young men about the obligations of Shudo, without which their integrity is easily jeopardized. Someone in their practice of Shudo is romantically connected to only one male lover in life. Otherwise, he would be no better than his professional sodomite or a prostitute, which is a disgrace for the samurai. Saikak is known for his remark, "A young man without a patron older lover is like a young girl without a fiancé." A fearful man's love is never deeply rooted. He is doomed to abandon his lover later. If such a man approaches you, wisely reject him sharply and explain that he is invoking difficulties. If the other continues to ask what kind of difficulties, then say, "How dare you ask such a question when I am still alive?" If he continues to probe, strike him down angrily with your value. The older must be certain of the faithful heart of the younger lover. His amorous desires will be fulfilled if he strives strongly enough for several years, even at the cost of his life. If you maintain Shudo, never chase after women. Instead, dedicate yourself to training in martial arts, the way of Bushido. Be stubborn. A stubborn attitude suits men under 40 better than intelligence and discretion. Even in their 40s and beyond, a man who hasn't developed a strong will can't influence others despite his character and position. Challenge the enemy impetuously. If you're determined to kill someone, never allow yourself to think, "I might lose if I confront the enemy immediately. Instead, I'll choose a delay tactic." Such thinking robs you of the precise timing and diminishes your original resolve. The way of the samurai demands that you charge headlong into your enemy, even blindly. During Buddhist ceremonies at the Jisuin temple near Kawakami, a drunken page of a high-ranking man started a quarrel with the ferryman on a boat. Upon reaching the shore, the page drew his sword, but was first struck on the head by the boatman's pole. Other boatmen rushed in with oars to beat the page down. The lord, however, turned away and left the scene. Another page ran back, apologized to the boatman, knocked down the unruly page, and brought him back to the lord's residence. That night, it said, the beaten page had his swords taken away. The lord is responsible because he didn't reprimand the rabid page or calm the boatman on the ferry. Then, when the page was struck on the head, soothing words were out of the question. Even if the page had acted unreasonably, under the guise of apologizing, the lord should have killed the boatman with the first blow and the page with the next. The lord was a coward. Do not abuse the dead. When a samurai remarked, "How sad that the son died so young," I replied, "True, he was a valuable man." When that samurai lamented that in these days of decline, social obligations are completely discarded, I consoled him. As a proverb says, when things go utterly wrong, they'll turn for the better. Therefore, this world will undoubtedly improve. After his execution, Nakano Shugen was thoroughly bad-mouthed at a meeting in Commander Okisenobu's group house. Yobu reprimanded the men. "We should not speak ill of the dead. People who have been accused should be pitied. Saying the best we can about the deceased aligns most closely with the samurai's duty of mutual compassion. Only heaven knows if Nakano Shugen won't be rehabilitated as a righteous man in years to come." These precious words suited the old warrior well. Understand others to clarify matters. One should quickly understand others and act accordingly. With a quarrelsome man of strong will, you must yield thoughtfully and win his reason without sounding harsh or leaving room for anger. Mind and words should work together to resolve disputes. The 3 principles of service. The deep foundation of a samurai's service is generally to offer his own life to his lord. The samurai must first cultivate wisdom, kindness, and courage within himself. To a layperson, It might seem impossible to possess these three virtues together, but it's easy. Wisdom, immeasurably rich wisdom, can be attained by asking others for advice. Kindness arises from working for the benefit of others, thinking more of them than of yourself. Courage means baring your teeth and crushing adverse circumstances underfoot without cleverly overthinking the consequences. I know no better advice than this. All in all, service isn't difficult. Anyone who wants to be considered at least a little useful should think only of these three principles. Passionate devotion. There's nothing more important than passionate devotion in a given moment. Life consists of this flame that reignites over and over. The mind of a man awakened to this truth won't be burdened by pressing concerns or desires. He must align his life solely with passionate devotion. Yet, no one is able to fully realize this truth. Everyone keeps searching for other seemingly important things in life, consistently showing passionate devotion and eventually being freed from delusion takes many years. Once awakened, you don't always have to consciously think about focused effort. Passionate devotion in every moment, once truly realized, allows a man to stand calmly above daily confusion over trivial matters. Rationality is contained within this passionate devotion. The trend of the times. The trend of the times cannot be changed. Society becomes increasingly corrupt and approaches downfall. Just as a year encompasses different seasons, not just spring and summer, the same applies to a day that changes its face every moment. Any attempt to make present society like it was 100 years ago must fail. We should seek to continually improve ourselves in line with the ever-changing course of time. People who only nostalgically look to the past are wrong because they miss this crucial point. On the other hand, those who overly value current fashions and neglect old customs are superstitious and unreasonable. Don't hesitate to ask the Lord for financial help. During my past service, I wasn't troubled by thoughts of my strained finances. If my family were without food, I thought, I could ask the Lord's entourage or the Lord himself for money. Years ago, when I had to depart for Kyoto to take up my official duties, I asked the elder council members for financial support. My household finances are severely strained due to my upcoming long stay in Kyoto. I would greatly appreciate considerate handling of this, for if my debt remained unpaid, it would tarnish the venerable name of our clan. The debts don't stem from my selfishness. They're caused by my official stay in Kyoto. The council members reported this to the Lord, who generously granted me a sum. Whoever has completely entrusted everything to the Lord need not worry about his own affairs. Thoughtlessly expressing reservations, on the other hand, complicates matters. Don't let yourself be struck down from behind. In a certain battle, things looked bad for Lord Ieyasu's army. Later, people supposedly spoke with admiration of his retreat. Ieyasu is a great commander of invaluable courage. Not one of his samurai who fell in the unequal battle was found with his back turned to the enemy. The mental attitude of these samurai was evident even after their death. This makes our present attitude seem shameful by comparison. Love in its highest form. The highest form of love is to keep your burning love to yourself and not even open your heart to the beloved person. Receive my consuming love for you from the smoke rising before my burning body when my life is over. Love that's revealed to a beloved while still alive isn't deep. Dying with concealed love is the highest form of love. Even if asked by the one you love whether this is the case, it's crucial to answer immediately. That's the last thing I can imagine. What a complicated path true love must take. When I discussed this recently, some men agreed with me, and we were called the Smoke Group. This philosophy of love applies to everything. It illustrates, for example, the relationship between lord and retainer. As long as someone doesn't refrain from shameful actions in solitude or secretly dwelling on base thoughts, he cannot appear pure and clear in public. Every moment is crucial. The present moment might well be the decisive one. The critical moment could be right now. People who see moments as separate things can't be ready in times of emergency. If a man were called to his Lord right now and asked to express his thoughts on a particular matter, he'd most likely not have a prompt answer. This shows that the attitude toward crucial moments differs from that toward ordinary times. Viewing these different moments as one and the same requires daily practice, even in leisure time, so you can explain things clearly when summoned before the shogun, the feudal lord, or elder council members. Even if you're certain your low rank will never grant you the opportunity to speak in the Lord's presence. This attitude applies to everything. Whether you're on the battlefield or in civil service, be accordingly prudent. If we analyze this deeply, we must recognize how constantly inattentive we are. Be prepared for death. Rich and poor, young and old, awakened and deluded, all must die. Death comes to each of us, and even if a person knows this truth, he convinces himself that he is the last one who must die after all others have encountered this inevitable fate. No one harbors a thought of the approaching death that can knock on his door at any moment. How short-sighted to think that if there is any secret formula for dealing with certain death, it lies in the notion that nothing one does can avoid death, that one's own life is nothing but an empty dream. Never be inattentive towards the shadow of death that skulks densely around your feet. Encouragement is better than sympathy. When thoughtless words of pity like, "I'm sorry to hear that," are spoken to someone who has lost his presence of mind due to an unexpected misfortune, the suffering person only becomes more depressed and unable to think reasonably. In such a case, it is better to distract the other's attention by comforting him. "You are lucky. It could have been worse," or similar words, as if nothing bad had happened. If he clings to such encouragement, the suffering person can surely recover and see things again in a reasonable light. In this uncertain world, one must harbor long-lasting worry or joy. How to settle a dispute. Before negotiating a matter at a conference, the chairman should first discuss the case in detail with the person directly involved. Then listen to the opinions of others present at the conference and make a decision. Otherwise, someone else might get hurt. It is also advisable, in matters that require serious consultation, to privately ask for comments from those who are not involved or who stand outside the ordinary mass, as they can analyze them reasonably, being unbiased towards the matter. Members of one's own group tend to take sides in favor of their own men upon request. Their comments are then naturally of no use. Gods and impurity. They say of gods that they hate impurity, yet I do not pray to them daily without self-interest. I was long devout towards them and prayed for my luck on the battlefield, where I was supposed to fight, rising over blood-stained and road dead bodies. If the gods now look away because they despise my impurity, I must accept what comes. With this fate, I bow to the gods whether I am pure or not. The short life of my husband. The life of my husband is only a fleeting moment. A man should spend his life doing what he truly wants. In this short life, it would be idiotic for a man to force himself into something he does not like and thus spend his existence suffering. If this thought is, of course, misinterpreted, it is harmful. Therefore, I kept it to myself and never told young men. I like my naps. I think about them stylishly, and according to my current circumstances, I only want to stay in the house and enjoy sleeping. Appearance. The appearance of a person shows his dignity and is an expression of the depth of his character. His concentrated effort, cheerful attitude, silent pose, polite disposition, posture, gritted teeth, and piercing gaze. All this shows that such an external appearance stems from constant attention and seriousness. A man of low birth in a high position. A man of lower origin who now holds an important position previously gave cause for promotion. His virtue was worthy of his rise. If others do not want to work with a person of simple origin or feel embarrassed serving under a man who was only a foot soldier until recently, they are unforgivably misguided. If the man of low birth who has attained a noble position is endowed with more virtue than the one who was already born into that status, the former must be respected more strongly. Respectful distance. A samurai must consider that the lord, ministers, and older council members must keep a respectful distance from him so that he can undertake something great. If these people completely loosen up in his presence and allow themselves to become, it will be difficult for him to carry out a great endeavor. Personal favoritism through the superior via relationships damages character. A man who is supported by personal relationships and favors cannot express his own opinion. Despite his years of hard-fought service, people will contemptuously say that he enjoyed special privileges because of his personal bond with the superior. This calls his entire service into question. Keep your mouth shut. Be careful not to make remarks that provoke resistance in connection with current matters. When there are complications, people tend to get excited and unconsciously talk about nothing else. Visiting someone. Before visiting someone for a small chat, you should inform the other about the planned visit. Otherwise, you might find the host worried and facing unusual difficulties, which would ruin the pleasure of the visit. In general, it is better to visit someone only if you are invited. Even if you are invited, a visit to a depressing and unpleasant meeting can end too often, allowing random meetings to have no calm conversations from heart to heart. Even from meetings for passing time, mistakes often arise. But even if you are affected by misfortune and worry, you should not neglect to receive visitors. Do not be speechless. If someone, whether drunk or simply talking nonsense, makes a rude remark in your presence that you cannot ignore, it is advisable to respond with a few words to clean up the situation. A man whose spirit quickly burns into anger is too impatient to immediately counter with an appropriate remark, feels cornered, and draws his sword. Always staying silent is cowardly. The effect of appropriate words that must be uttered on the spot must be well considered in one's own mind. Selfish desires in protest. Shogun said, selfish desires are included in the word Khan, meaning open protest against the Lord. Such protest should not be raised in follower service. No one knows if he ever admonished his Lord, nor did he ever really convince his Lord through pure logic. He always influenced his Lord in silence. The old grandfather of Kasumar never requested an audience to register protest against his Lord. Usually, he seized a favorable opportunity to advise the Lord privately, where his words were gladly accepted because no one knew. The Lord's mistakes never surfaced. When one's own counsel is private, it does not count towards the Lord's approval. The follower must seriously destroy his brain to gain the Lord's approval through other objective paths. Then, he will surely become tied to repeated advice and, with his misdeeds, to the follower's path, to stand stronger to protect the Lord's mistakes from becoming known in public. Don't fail through life. Everyone fails sometimes due to impatience in a great undertaking. Always think that the time is not yet come, and you can see how your burning desires materialize much earlier than expected. That is, in due time. Imagine how things will look in 15 years. The world may have been drastically changed. In this gradually deteriorating world, people lose their abilities over time, and silver is replaced by gold as treasure. When gold reserves are exhausted or copper replaces silver when all silver is gone, relentless effort from this moment can make someone a useful man in 15 years. What is nothing but a fleeting moment in a dream, as long as someone carefully attends to his health, he may perhaps see his long-held dream of service as a useful follower to the Lord come true. If the world is full of outstanding men, it is hard to surpass others. During an era in which everything decays, it is much easier to be someone significant. The story of my life. I was born when my father was already 70 years old. He always said it wouldn't bother him to sell me to a salt merchant or someone else as takuso. He heard my father, Lord Katsuig, always tells me that you even practice in your follower service when you are not being watched by others. Your loyal service will surely appear useful to your descendants to the Lord. Then he called me Matsukame, after which Hideyoshi Risemon kindly appointed Hakamatu Keritusam to me. At the age of 9, I was called as a young man to Lord with Kuzushige and assigned the name Fu. When I also served Prince Tunashige, I liked jumping onto his fire pit with a blanket, letting myself be carried on his back and causing all sorts of nonsense. In everyone's eyes, I was a real rascal. When I became 13, Lord Mitakusige ordered the initiation rite for me. After a year of self-imposed restriction in my house, I reported myself on May 1st of the following year as a squire under the new name Ichiu. Humiliated by those who looked down on me as a samurai of low rank, I tried since day and night to find out how I could best strive in my service. At that time, I visited the residence of Godoemon to listen to his speeches every night. One night he said, "The old men claim that those attracted by fame and wealth are not followers, nor are those who are not attracted to them, but no one would seriously think." When I looked hard after Da's effort, I suddenly saw my path open before me. Sun's instruction taught me that the highest service of a follower is always to speak before the Lord for the protection of the clan and to win a ministerial post for this purpose instead of remaining low in the hierarchy. Convinced that one should seek progress not for personal fame and wealth, but for the benefit of one's highest service, I decided to become a minister. A man who was promoted to a high post in his youth later always proved ineffective, so I worked day and night and finally settled in my 50s, shedding yellow tears, if not blood tears. Despite my deep efforts, I died. The Lord, before I had held the post of minister, those who had already been promoted to the highest ranks dishonored his name, after which I was called what I am now. While on one hand, I could not fulfill my greatest wish to serve as a minister, on the other hand, my years of hard effort towards the goal were comparable to the final fulfillment. It is true, if a man sets a goal, he can achieve it. Those who took care of the deceased lord and who were punished after his death had caused the punishment themselves because they acted out of self-deception. Even if the story of my life sounds paradoxical, unfathomable fate has guided me through my life. I reveal it to you today in the silence of the mountain. Envious followers. Once there was a newcomer among those who stood close to Lord Nao Shig, who was particularly favored. Older followers asked for an audience with the Lord. They said to him, "Lord, it seems that you particularly care for the son whom we did not see on the battlefield and heard nothing about his usefulness. Could you tell us the reasons why this man is in your service and why he is favored by you?" "You are right," explained the Lord. "This man is not useful in times of battle, but I have taken a liking to him. I feel reassured when I assign him to lowly tasks. I cannot ask experienced followers like you to perform such lowly tasks. I depend on you in times of war." A brave follower who became a bandit. The impoverished Saitono Suk one day had no money left for rice, which his wife lamented. Upon hearing her concern, Jonuk left the house with his swords in hand and said, "Although you are a woman, you have a limited mind. You lose your heart over something trivial like the desire for rice. There is rice everywhere for us. Just wait a little." Then he looked down the street and saw farmers with their horses carrying rice on their backs. Jonosuke asked where the farmers were going, and they replied that they were on their way to the fair at the castle. "In this case," Jonosuke said, "bring everything along here and leave it in my house. I, Saito Jonosuke, need rice for the officials here and there. Carrying this heavy load of rice to go here and there must be very arduous for you. Leave the rice with me and show my receipt to the village chief." His words could not convince the farmers, and they left angrily. Jonosuke drew his sword and ordered them to stop. Thus the farmers were forced to carry the rice into his house and return home with his receipt. Jonosuke showed the rice to his wife and boasted, "Here are mountains of rice. Take as much as you want." This incident soon became known. Jonosuke reported it just as it had transpired to the officials who investigated the case. He was found guilty and sentenced to death. Lord Katsushige ordered an aide to inform his retired father, Lord Naosuge, of the evidence of Jonosuke's guilt. Upon hearing this news, the retired lord addressed the aide without a word to his wife. "You have just heard that Jonosuke is to be executed. How regrettable." He defended the province of Season in bloody battles like a wild man, risking his life. That was more valuable than all of Japan and all of China combined. He was one of the few whose superior service enabled our comfortable and peaceful lives as Lord and Lord's wife. Jonosuke is a man of incomparable bravery who distinguished himself multiple times on the battlefield. I have driven him into this wretched existence in which he sometimes had nothing to eat. How could I survive myself if such a follower were to be killed? The couple mourned Jonosuke's fate with tears of resentment in their eyes. Surprised, the aide hastily withdrew and informed Lord Katsushige of Lord Naosuge's grief as he had experienced it. "How kind you are," said the impressed Lord Katsushige. "I have long sought a way to atone for my son's guilt. How could I let Jonosuke be killed and thereby torment my parents, who hold him in such high esteem? Hurry and inform them that he will be pardoned." Upon hearing this, Lord Naosuge folded his hands in prayer and bowed before the main citadel. "He is my own son, and I am so grateful to him for his consideration. Nothing brings me more joy than this news." An aggressive spirit like Prince Akin. Lord Naosuge, due to an official matter at the Third Citadel, had to realize that the Lord was not there, and no one knew where he was. Even during the second summons the next day, the Lord remained missing. After a thorough search of the castle grounds, the Lord was finally found on the lookout tower. The prince immediately climbed up and asked the Lord what he was doing there. Lord Naosuge replied, "For a few days, I have been observing the public morals of our clan." Further, he explained, what this means is observing and analyzing passers-by on the street. Unfortunately, the soldiers' morale of the province Shizen has been weakening lately. A man in your position must remember what I say. Most passers-by look down because their spirits have become friendly. Without a violent spirit, however, a samurai's assault cannot have any power. From a man with an unbending heart, who always considers everything sincerely and honestly, one cannot expect him to fulfill male duties. Sometimes one must boast and keep one's spirit aggressive and carefree to become a samurai. Hence, it is said that Prince Akinokami, who withdrew his oath to die, Kuranojo, the unrivaled master in sword fighting, served Lord Naosuge and was blessed by his extraordinary affection. Lord Kuranojo offered his written oath to follow him to the other world through seppuku upon his death. Later, Kuranojo got into a legal dispute with a farmer who was tried before the clan's council, whom he held responsible for sufficient reasons. Fuming with anger, Kuranojo turned to his lord. How can a samurai who is sacrificed for a farmer follow his lord to the underworld through seppuku? Please release me from my oath. Lord Naosuke sighed. In a legal dispute, one wins and the other loses. You are well versed in martial arts but know little about the world. How regrettable. Then he handed him back the written oath. Be constant.
One enemy remaining.
ضربني وانا تنضربك وات ذا فوك.
Still in sight.
ورا انا كنشك تحاول يدفع معاه ما جيت لك الجهه ديالها كنت كنضربك انت. كنت كنقول لاعبين حتى هما عندهم هنيون ديال.
Spike planted. Gotta go. Almost out. Reloading. This way. Go, go, go. Did you really expect that to work? They're losing heart. I can feel it. I'm out of here. I'm out of here. Go, go, go. Gotta go.
I need this.
هذيك امي عطات الساعه
Watch them falter.
Gotta go.
كاين شي نبي.
Grenade is live.
Face your fear.
تراهم تيليبورتي حدايا. وانا هذاك ضربك على الظلام
Spike planted. Go, go, go.
شويه كي قاري تيليبورت حدايا واش هذاك اومين
Here we go.
اللي كنضرب فيه.
Reloading. Running low. One enemy remaining.
مات.
Spike's dead. You're welcome. Reloading.
Remember, no one wants to die out here, but you don't always get what you
لازم
want.
ندير المقتل ديال المقتل اوديو فويس اوفر.
I'm out of here.
الحمد لله يا الحمد لله. استغفر الله.
Snuff them out.
I'm out of here.
ولا كشتي ولا كيتفرقوا.
Shadows traveling.
ما حقي بعدا.
Joke's over! You're dead!
طيب اي
Take this. Coming through. Go, go, go.
هذا الشيء اللي نقرب. قدمش بزاف.
One enemy remaining. Ow. Spike's here. Last round before the switch. Don't be cheap. I got money. Need something? I got money. Need something?
كان واعر عندك هي كدير الشجره الحمراء.
Defuse suppressed. All missiles away.
يعني جوج شمس جوج شمس
Ammunition.
جنبي الشمس هناك الله عليك الصحة
Spike down mid.
عندك السحارة
I'm out of here.
عندك كاين جوج هاد الخراوته كيعمينا بهاد الزبل هذا وحدايا
Go go go.
كيضربونا بحال عندك
One enemy remaining.
شو والله إلا جبتها برا إذا تسعى بالدم والله ما عاد كي درت لها
Switching sides.
خلع هذاك الحمار ديال
Remember, your weapon is only a tool.
هو اللي
You can't
شقا يا
just
صاحبي
shoot.
لحدك السيركل
You have to think.
وحلت فيها نجي عندنا السبايك دروك
Gun here. Gotta go. There. 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 Placing sentry.
By any means necessary. All missiles away.
Still in sight.
عندك
Reloading.
عندك بين الله
Enemy spotted mid. Placing swarm grenade. Swarm grenade out.
هذه من الله عندك متطورون هذا عندك
Last player standing. Spike down B.
لا الجو كاين ثلاثة كلهم تم لا حسن
Everyone note down your observations, then let's run it again.
يمكن نمشيو من الوسط ونتفرقوا من
I'm out of here.
نمشيو من هنا نشوفوا
Go go go.
لا ندور على
I
اليمين
suggest we keep winning.
كان نمشي سنايبر لكن بقى عندي معطي ستار
Turret out. I'm out of here.
Shadows traveling.
I'm out of here. Placing swarm grenade.
ميد
Swarm grenade out.
نحاول عندكم الدعوة سير ديفيو سير إلا خاوي عندكم هذا
Gotta go.
والله الله يجي الدنيا
Turret out. Reloading. Ah, turret down. Reloading. One enemy remaining. Go go go.
صافي بلانتي
Spike planted. Alarm bot out.
يلا ود
Placing swarm grenade. Here.
All missiles away.
الله ضربته الله
Not a
عليك صح
chance. Go go go. My advice: don't get shot. Gun here.
راني يستهدل الدال يوقفوا الدال طيب خليه طيب اشتريت واحد
Yeah, breaks over. Gotta go.
انا ما صاحبنيش اكون انت مغربي بيلاش كيسمع الصوت ديالك
Had in their vision.
عندك كاين سنايبر
Got one.
All missiles
Go,
away.
go.
واحد فوق
Enemy spotted A. Placing swarm grenade. Swarm grenade out. Placing swarm grenade. Swarm grenade out.
Got them.
Reloading.
بعد الدم مبرد وقد دمك
Blinding.
والله بعدني الصراحه يعني في ميد
One enemy remaining.
كان نسير
No more deals, Chase. I'm out of here.
هذه يا خوت نشدهم في ذاك ميد و كيدوزو الميد
Their tech is only as good as their skill. And there we have some Gotta go. Gotta go.
يزبل لي الضمير شويه ضرب لا غنلعب ما قلنا
Turret out. I'll show them. Lintikayo.
ما عنديش فلوس
They will cower. See nothing. Enemy spotted me.
All missiles away.
Turret destroyed. Enemy spotted A.
Cover going out.
هو هيديك الدير من
Ultimate is
برا
ready.
Spike down mid.
Bueno. I got the spike.
Joke's over! You're dead!
Last player standing.
هو اللي
Spike down mid.
دار هذا شنو هذيك الحركه اللي دار لا اصلا حرقني هو بالعافيه في الاول ما
30 seconds left.
راه كلا عصر اللي ضحك كلا عصر هذا عنده
One enemy remaining.
باينه
Shadows traveling.
خويا
Stealing sight.
Clutch.
لا هذا الصحاب جيد الله
That is
يسامحك
fun.
Match point.
Put them to sleep.
Go, go, go. Gun here. I'm out of here.
ثاني الميد دوران
Reloading.
I'm out of here.
ولا سيف كان كنا نشوف لا سير رمي
No prisoners. Placing sentry.
Locating target.
Placing alarm bot.
Traveling.
كاينين
Cover going out.
Drone is down.
Watch out.
This is how it ends.
Stealing sight.
مات واحد
All missiles away.
مات واحد بعد بكل كاينين
Light munition.
Gotta go. Placing swarm grenade. Swarm grenade out. The hunt begins. Finish. Spike planted. One enemy remaining. Flawless. Attackers win. Keep it up.
We can't stop here.
الله يعطيك الصحة ترغب إن شاء الله طيب صحة أنا قريب قتلية 12 نطلع الأيرون